Wondering how to claim the latest self-employed grant? Well, watch on. As a business accountant, my team and I spend all day long helping business owners on their journey. And of course, one thing that's kept us really busy over the sort of last 12 months is the government help that is available for those that have been affected by coronavirus. And of course, there's been many different types of help and types of schemes. And in fact, there's loads of videos we've done on these topics over the last year. So what I want to talk about in this one is the self-employed grant 4 and mention at the back end self-employment grant 5. So if you've sort of been under a rock and haven't really heard about these grants, over the time of the lockdowns, what you've been able to do is claim, if you were eligible, which was a big issue, some money from the Revenue and Customs. They have a look at your profits over a period, decide what your average earnings are, and then they've tended to give you a lump sum based on those average earnings, depending on where we are in the sort of lockdown journey. And what I'm going to be talking about now particularly is that grant 4. Now, before I get into it, if you like these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button below to get notified whenever we release another one just like it. So then, how much is on offer with grant 4? So grant 4 was, a lot of the time these things have tracked what they do with the employed version. So people in employment and employers had the opportunity to do furlough. So you might have come across, I'm sure, this term. It's the new term of 2020 that we all now know and is in our vocabulary, but it very much tracks that. So at the moment, what's on offer is 3 months of pay. So this particular grant, grant 4, covers the 1st of Feb to the 30th of April. So it bizarrely straddles tax years, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But for now, that's what's on offer, and they're going to give you 80% of what they deem to be your average monthly trading profits. So the way they calculate that is they take the last 4 years' tax returns and work out, sort of add all your trading profits together and cut those down, and they work out, look, that's what you, in theory, earn a month. Now, that's taxable trading profits. It's the profits on your tax return. So unfortunately, if you bought a big van in one of those years or something like that and use some reliefs to bring your tax bill down, then unfortunately your earnings are going to be lower for those purposes, and therefore, in theory, that grant comes down. So there is some weird interaction like that, but that is unfortunately the way they've chosen to do it. And the biggest deal was that in order to qualify previously in the previous grants, they were referencing your tax return that was a lot older. Now they're taking into account the one that you probably would have just submitted if you did it last minute in January or even February, because they extended the deadline slightly. But they're now taking the most recent tax returns submitted as well into account. So if you weren't and didn't qualify for the previous grants, you might now do. So it's worth checking, and I'll talk to you about the claim process in a minute. So what happens is, they add that up, they work out 80% of that monthly amount, and they're going to give you 3 lots of that in 1 month. So recap that, your average monthly figure, whatever that is, they're going to give you 3 lots of it at 80%. So in 1 lump, and it's capped at 7.5 grand. So if you're lucky enough to earn that kind of money, then that's the kind of grant level that they're going to cap you at. Now, there are some caveats around the eligibility. I'm not going to cover all of them in the video, but let's just say you need really to be up to date with your tax returns. So if you've got anything outstanding, it's unlikely you're going to qualify. And also your self-employed bit needed to be over 50% of your total income. So if you had a job where you earned 70% and you had a side hustle self-employment, you're probably not going to qualify on that basis. But again, it is kind of an average, so they'll look at that. So if you think there's a chance that you could have a claim, then you can always go on the tool and it will tell you very quickly whether that's the case or not. And in fact, as we're talking to you about this, many of you might already have had letters saying HMRC believe you're eligible and inviting you to apply. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So who can apply? How do you apply? That kind of stuff. Well, if you believe that you should be applying, there's an online tool. You literally, and I'll stick the link in the description down below, but basically you go there and you just start the process. You put in your UTR number, your tax, basically their version of how they identify you, your tax reference, and they'll know whether that's the case. As I say, many of you may have already got letters and things right now inviting you. Now, the biggest thing with this is that they changed the wording to what they did previously. You now have to have a reasonable belief that you're going to have a significant reduction in your earnings due to coronavirus in that period. Now, that's a very big change of wording. Before, it was kind of you just needed to be adversely affected, which most people could say during the first few lockdowns they were. Now you need to have reasonable belief that your trading profits over the year are going to be down as a result, and there's quite a bit of detail on that. Again, I can send you some links down below, but that is a big change. So I think you really need to look at, am I being realistic here? It isn't free money. They've specifically told you that you should have belief that this is the case. So really think about that this time around. It's not quite the same as the other ones where it was very loose. This one is a lot more specific. And in fact, they give some examples of where that would be the case. Now, the other things that are really important apart from that belief is knowing that you have been trading, in both years and you're still looking to trade, either it might be though you can't trade at the moment. So let's say you're in an industry where they literally shut down during that period. Well, then you're not going to meet the first criteria, but because you're intending to trade but you just can't, you're also okay. Now, where you need to be careful is if you've done things like you've ceased and then become a limited company in that period and things like this. At the minute, that's a little bit of a grey area on whether that's actually okay because you've technically ceased. And for those of you that literally have ceased, you obviously shouldn't be claiming the grant because you need to be saying that you're going to continue to trade moving forward. So bear that in mind. It is a lot stricter than before. And as I say, there are some other criteria that you have to meet. If you've got problems with outstanding returns and all this kind of stuff, then sometimes you just might not be able to claim, but just do that. But yeah, the process is actually very straightforward. You just go online, enter your UTR and a couple of details, and they know, you don't have to tell them, they know the figures that they think they should be paying you if you're eligible. So, and what we saw during the first grants is if you weren't, then there was a process to kind of log a sort of not a complaint, it's probably the wrong word, but log an issue with Revenue and Customs, and they will come back and tell you, why or what's going on there. So if you do have that issue and you absolutely believe you should be having it, then you can use that. What we did see is generally, though, it is computer says no. So just because you believe you should have it, if you just don't fit the criteria, you don't fit the criteria. It's very strict and it was very tough. Now it's a good thing they've taken this extra tax return in. What I would say is there is the chance if you got the grants before, the chances are you should be getting the grants now, but obviously there's an extra tax year taken into account. So it might actually bring your average down depending on how your profits looked. So bear that in mind as we go. In terms of how quickly you're going to get the cash, well, they actually pay it in theory within 6 working days. And history tells us actually the revenue have got this down pretty sweet and it does actually work quite well. So you will get it quick. Be very, very careful. The time recording this video, there's a lot of scams going on. So be really careful about those. Make sure that any email you get, and HMRC are using more email correspondence and things. So that is legit. Just make sure you check the email address it's coming from and hover over any links before you click them to get a little bit of a display and see, does that look real? If any doubt and you've got an accountant, do check with them. Now, talking of accountants, unfortunately, accountants can't help you claim this. It has to be done by you online. For some people that are not technically great, that's obviously a bit of a problem. I know even in our client base, we've got a few people that have struggled to do it, but unfortunately, it does have to be something that the individual does, albeit obviously someone can help them physically do it. It's not something that agents have access to, unfortunately. They just didn't build that. And to a degree, whilst it is frustrating, the system they have built, when you are eligible, is really, really good and really, really quick to get your money. So go and do that. And then a very quick, before I talk about Grant 5 finally, I just want to talk about the tax implications of this. So I think a lot of people forget that the grants are taxable and subject to national insurance. They go in like normal income into your tax return on that. And bizarrely, what they've done is they've got against some of their normal rules. Normally, by standard, what would tend to happen is you would work out any income that's in the period. So if your year ran from the 6th of April to the 5th of April each year, if you had some sort of payment that covered amounts outside of that period and inside of it, you'd only account for the amounts inside of that period in your tax return. What Revenue and Customs have said to keep it simple is, look, just basically put the grant on the tax return in the year you got it. So, this particular grant is going to be paid over the next few weeks. So you're going to be looking at putting it in your 21-22 tax return, even though some of it's actually for February of the last tax year. So that should help simplify that process. I know that was a question that popped up quite a lot on our previous videos, and part of the reason we couldn't answer it is we didn't know. Revenue and Customs have come out and subsequently clarified it. So that's that one. Now, finally then, let's talk about Grant 5. Now, Grant 5, not too much is known other than it doesn't sound amazing, but I think the reason they've kept it that way is because it depends what they're going to do with furlough. But looking at it, what they're going to say is they're going to look at your turnover, and if your turnover is significantly reduced, you're either going to get, and it's quite stark, you're either going to get a 30% grant of your average monthly trading profit, or you're going to get another 80%. So having looked at some of the criteria that's out there at the moment for this, I think it's going to be unlikely for a lot of people the 80% is going to be achievable. But it really depends. If you've got a business that's been massively smashed by this, then of course you're going to get the 80%, but that's there. So not a lot's known, but it's going to be 30 or 80%. It doesn't look like there's a sliding scale at current. It's one or the other, and more details on that as it comes. So that's it. That's how you claim. That's what you're going to get, and that's where you can get it. If you think this video has been useful, share it with somebody else that needs to know this, and we'll see you in the next one.